Village greens, rustic medieval churches, country lanes, friendly locals. Welcome to London. So, if you've ever wondered which areas of London bear the least resemblance to that of a capital city, then stay tuned, because I believe I have the answer, and it all stems from one specific borough, and very much the odd one out borough at that. With that, I present to you, in 4K, a virtual tour of the other side of London. First off, we need a starting point, and that point is Hayes in southeast London, not because it doesn't look like your typical suburb of the capital, but because it does, thereby giving us a frame of reference by which to contrast the rural imagery quite literally just around the corner. The copious mock Tudor frontage of the shops speaks to the story of the rapid growth of the areas surrounding London in the Victorian era, areas which would ultimately become part of the capital itself by 1965 with the establishment of the ceremonial county of Greater London. The railway station holds its own quirk in that regard, going as it does by the name Hayes Kent, aside from the exterior local signage that is, so as to differentiate from Hayes West London. Of course, this Hayes hasn't technically been in Kent since 1965, but the locals tend to feel otherwise. On the looks front, well, it's a far cry from Bristol Temple Meads, but it does set our bearings for anyone wishing to recreate this walk, or part of it, in person. As a visual palate cleanser, let's get the tour started with a walk through a wooded path just south of Hayes en route to our first destination, complete with some settled snow from the day of filming as an unintended bonus. This, by the way, is the London borough of Bromley, which, being the least densely populated of the 32 boroughs of London, is the logical choice for showcasing the least urban-looking parts of the capital, starting with Keston. Archaeological findings in the immediate area, including a Roman mausoleum and an Iron Age hill fort, imply that there's more to this village than meets the eye. Of particular note is that William Pitt the Younger was once local to the area and met with William Wilberforce here on several occasions to discuss the abolition of slavery around 2 decades before the Slave Trade Act of 1807 finally passed. Leaving Keston, we head south and come to a fork in the road. To the right is Biggin Hill Airport. To the left is our next village. We take the left path. But wait, an airport, you say? Indeed. If you thought the only 2 airports actually within London itself were Heathrow and London City, well, I've got news for you. The airport we just passed is a former Royal Air Force base, which today provides commercial services for private jets, corporate jets and such like for its wealthy clients who probably want to keep the entire existence of Biggin Hill Airport a secret. Whoops. Anyway, our next village awaits us, and it is an absolute picture. The village of Down. The occasional flintstone-fronted buildings on Down's historic High Street give it a feel reminiscent of North Norfolk, and there aren't many parts of London to which that applies. 2 pubs help to give it a close-knit community feel, and more still for their ultra-traditional names of, respectively, the George and Dragon and the Queen's Head, the latter of which is said to be named in honour of Queen Elizabeth I after she paid a visit to Down in 1559. A lack of listed status would imply the building itself is likely much more recent than the Elizabethan original, but for historic buildings you only have to look, well, pretty much next door to St Mary's Church, along with its 13th century tower. Not to mention the erstwhile home of the village's most famous former resident, Charles Darwin. It was in this Grade 1 listed country house, now a museum run by English Heritage, that Shrewsbury-born Darwin lived from 1842 right up until his death in 1882. During his time here, he wrote several natural history books, including the groundbreaking On the Origin of Species. As for the subject of his local village, he wrote the following: "The country is extraordinarily rural and quiet, with narrow lanes and high hedges, and hardly any ruts. It is really surprising to think London is only 16 miles off. Little did he know that about a century later this would become 0 miles off. Heading south towards our next village, we passed through something quite peculiar, a hamlet consisting of a single street called Single Street, and the hamlet's name? Single Street. The onward path east takes a scenic turn as we head for Berries Hill. Incidentally, for the postcode nerds out there, we're now into a TN postcode. That's TN for Tunbridge Wells in Kent, making this an extremely rare instance of a part of London with neither a compass point nor an area of Greater London for a postcode prefix. And if that fact wasn't enough to knock you off your feet, well, here's a nice view from halfway up the hill. A sharp turn into our next village has some of the passing cars screech their tyres in protest, but causes fewer problems for pedestrians with sturdy shoes. And with that we enter Cudham. Heading up the street with the self-explanatory name of Church Approach, we're soon left with no doubt that this village goes back several centuries. The parish church of St. Peter and St. Paul is mentioned in the Domesday Book. The nave is Anglo-Saxon in origin, although to what extent the Normans rebuilt it is a matter of debate, but either way makes the 13th century chancel almost modern in comparison. For some, though, the local pub will be of greater interest, and in that regard we have the Blacksmith's Arms. Originally dating from 1628 during the reign of Charles I as a farm dwelling with stables, it became an alehouse in the 18th century, and one with pretty decent views just opposite at that. Now we have one final village to visit, and it's a fair old walk in a northeasterly direction, but it's worth the trek purely for the village's name alone, as you'll soon see. This also gives us time to reflect on a few things. Firstly, on an anecdotal note, on the day of filming this, I counted 4 occasions on which passing strangers said hello to me, and I can almost sense my northern contingent of viewers collectively spitting out their Yorkshire tea in disbelief at this, but that is the truth. The only reminder of this being in London at all is the occasional red bus. But to reiterate a point I made in a past video about London's easternmost point, the red buses do venture outside of the boundaries of the capital in a few instances. Then there's the question of identity. A survey carried out by a local news website, Kent Live, produced an eye-opening conclusion. It was conducted in Bromley town centre, which for context is a good 7 miles north of the area you're looking at. Out of 30 passers-by asked, 28 said they felt like they were in Kent, with just 2 claiming it as being part of London. Similar sentiments can be found in the northeastern corners of the capital, such as Romford, where the locals typically feel a stronger kinship to Essex than to the 1965 bureaucratic creation known as Greater London. Be that as it may, we make our way to our final village in this alternative tour of London. Now, while the Cotswolds has charming quintessential village names, such as Bourton-on-the-Water and Shipton-under-Wychwood, South East London has Pratt's Bottom. During the 18th century, a toll gate was established here to collect fees from stagecoach passengers travelling through Pratt's Bottom. The village of today features a pub, a primary school, a village hall, and an unusual looking church made from brick. I could throw in a joke or two about the name, but we've already reached the rear end of the tour, since any further south or east would put us officially into Kent, and any further north puts us back into the Victorian Railway era suburbs from whence we started, namely Chelsfield in this case. So if you've become jaded by the same old open-top bus tours of Westminster, perhaps this showcase of the real hidden London, and not hidden in the blogger's sense, usually in relation to Camden Town or Shoreditch, which are anything but hidden, has given you a new perspective on the visual diversity of this capital city, from the sublime to the ridiculous. Thanks for watching and have a great day.